What is it?
The main thing I got from it was like this sense of feeling seen and validated.
Well, why does it have to be this way?
This book was placed in my hand for this moment.
Insightful, learned a lot, wrote some quotes that I'm ready to like paint on my wall.
I love this book!
That we just kind of pull out some of the big themes that we see and talk about a few different ones.
I apologize if most of my contribution has K-pop references.
Alternative book title, The Feminine Mystique Part 2. You were really just gay all along. Welcome to Book Club.
With Julia!
And Victoria.
We are two lifelong friends who read a book and talk about it each episode.
This is a podcast where we explore new perspectives and we use books as tools for personal and community growth.
This week, we are talking about Night Sky with Exit Wounds by Ocean Vuong, a gripping poetry collection grappling with identity and family history.
If you care about spoilers for poetry, this is your spoiler warning.
Yeah.
We picked out a few poems that we're going to dive in deep and talk about things that we were surprised at, when we read it on the second or third time. So if you want to be listening with fresh ears, go read and come back. Otherwise, welcome to the party.
Welcome.
I apologize in advance for anything that sounds wrong with this audio because Julie and I are having a day. I'm sitting in the library and I thought I was going to be so smart and save myself a study room. And of course, the room I got is extremely echoey. So hopefully Julia made me sound amazing in her editing, but if she didn't, it's my fault. And Julia has a lawnmower in her background.
Yeah, I was so excited that I was with my setup in my friend's place, and then it didn't go as planned, and now there's a lawnmower, and it's just like, we need to stop moving around so much.
I know. Our nomadic lifestyles with our podcasting hobby jobs, whatever this is, it doesn't quite, align well.
Doesn't quite work.
No.
Victoria, we need our own recording studio. Anyway, if you would like to support us so that we can afford our own recording studio,
you would like to fund the Book Club with Julie and Victoria recording suite that we will have someday. Yeah.
You can start by rating, reviewing, and subscribing on any of your preferred podcast platforms. If you look in the show notes underneath any of our episodes on the podcast platform or on the website, there are links to books that we've talked about. All of those links go to bookshop.org, to our affiliate page on that website where you can buy any book you want to. Through our page, we get a very small kickback, which helps us buy books. That is available in the US, the UK, and Spain, we have recently learned. And then if you really want to join the party, you want to hang out with us more, get more extra content, behind the scenes content, personal content, autism related content, you can join our buymeacoffee.com/bookclub-with-JV. Our most recent fun members only thing that we did was our film club series where we review film or TV book adaptations. And the most recent one was like a small Jane Austen series where we reviewed Persuasion, which was very bad, and Fire Island, which was very good. So yeah, come hang out.
Yeah, thanks to all of our members who support the show and for all of you who've shopped on bookshop.org on our affiliate page. We appreciate you.
We love you.
Okay, so welcome to Low Key Poetry Hour. What was your experience reading this collection of poetry?
Yeah, I found this poetry collection in a bookstore in Bruges while exploring with Victoria. And
Yay.
I immediately dropped the reading that I was supposed to be doing to start this book. And I can't really binge a poetry book. It's like too dense. There's too many. You have to like think about each word so hard and your brain can't handle as much. So I read a little bit every night for like a week or two. And I loved it, even though I didn't know what was going on half the time. I liked that there were fragments of like a larger family story that we could piece together. I loved the way he sort of plays with form and point of view and multiple languages. Like he's really experimenting and doing it very, very well. Yeah, I didn't always understand where we were or whose body we were in, but I felt so drawn in and captivated anyway. I was just like, yes, I am here for the ride. Ocean Vuong, take me wherever we're going. his skill is incredible and truly devastating in the best way, and I had a great time. Yeah, what about you?
Yes, I knew we were reading this book for literally months, and I just last week walked down to the bookshop to finally pick up a copy. And so I did I was really excited to finally have it, and also felt like, oh my gosh, I need to start reading now. So I did that little dance where you're like trying to read while you walk. And it was like a beautiful fall day, and the sun was out, and I was just so happy to be back in Chicago. But then I felt like I might get hit by a car. So after one poem, I decided to wait until I was seated. So that's how I started reading it. And so yeah, I just read it over several sittings in the last 4 days or so. And I had one particularly cozy night. I was under a blanket in a quiet old house that I was staying at, and it was just the perfect vibe. And I recently set up my bookshelf in my new apartment, and I made a separate stack of my poetry collections. I've usually just interspersed them alphabetically within my books, but now I think I wanted to separate out by genre and be reminded that I have some poetry collections I enjoy reading. So yes, I'm excited to have this on the shelf and to revisit it. And yeah, I've enjoyed it.
I feel like this author, Ocean Vuong, is one of those people where you've heard the name and you're like, oh, I've got to read that.
Exactly.
Everyone's talking about how amazing he is, but you haven't read it yet.
I know. He was in my just consciousness without me even realizing it.
Yeah.
When I read the poem On Earth We Were Briefly Gorgeous, which is a poem in this collection, Night Sky with Exit Wounds, I was like, where have I heard this before? Mm-hmm. And I wasn't familiar with the poem, and I was so confused. I looked it up, and sure enough, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous is also the name of his novel that came out semi-recently, I think in the last couple of years. And so it's been in every bookstore everywhere. And with a name like Ocean Vuong, it just sticks out. I don't know anyone else named Ocean. And so it's oh. And then, everyone's talking about it. You see it on Bookstagram, and it just lives in your consciousness until you realize, oh wait, I haven't actually read any of his poetry.
Yeah.
I should probably get on that. So yes, if you've heard of him and you're like, maybe I should figure out what everyone's talking about, here's your invitation to join us on this journey.
Yeah.
So a little bit about our author. Vuong was born in Saigon, Vietnam, and raised in Hartford, Connecticut, in a working-class family of nail salon and factory laborers. There's a few really good interviews with him in The Guardian, and this quote kind of gives a little more of the backstory of his family that we also get in snippets throughout the poetry collection. So this is a quote from that interview. In his telling, Vuong's life story begins 2 generations before he was born, when his American grandfather, a Michigan farm boy who, quote, wanted to be Miles Davis, joined the U.S. Navy with his trumpet in his backpack and was posted to Vietnam, where he fell in love with, quote, an illiterate girl from the rice paddies. Later, the article says, he says his grandparents were married with 3 daughters when his grandfather decided to visit his family in the U.S. and was wrong-footed by the fall of Saigon. Quote, my life and my mother's life wouldn't have happened without the war. But despite all this, 2 people loved each other, and the big lesson for me as an artist is that life is always more complicated than the headlines allow. Poetry comes in when the news is not enough. And this was really, I thought, a really pivotal point, not only in his life, and it becomes kind of a focus that comes back throughout the collection, but just really monumental. His grandfather just decided to take a trip home, but because of international and domestic affairs, tore their family apart. In his later years, after he immigrated to the U.S., Vuong did get a chance to build a relationship with his grandfather. Vuong's mother had him when she was 18, and not long after that, a police officer noticed that she was of mixed race, and her family was forced to flee the country. So they were evacuated to the Philippines, where they lived in a refugee camp. The photo on the front of the book is actually from when they were staying in the refugee camp in the Philippines. And Ocean was 2 years old at this point. So they lived in the refugee camp for a little while before receiving asylum in the U.S., and that's where he was raised in Connecticut. So Vuong was educated at Manchester Community College before transferring to Pace University to study international marketing. Without completing his first term, I think he was literally there 2 months.
Oh my God.
He dropped out of business school and enrolled at Brooklyn College, where he graduated with a BA in 19th century American literature.
That's so specific.
And later on received his MFA in poetry from NYU. So he currently lives in Massachusetts and serves as a tenured professor in the creative writing MFA program at NYU. He lives with his partner, Peter, which he notes as the one good thing to come out of his 8 weeks at business school, which I thought was adorable. Night Sky with Exit Wounds is Vuong's debut collection that was published back in 2016. The collection was very well received, won awards in the US and UK, and put him on the map as a poet to watch. And since then, he's released his novel we mentioned, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, as well as a second poetry collection, Time is a Mother, which you might have also seen at bookstores everywhere. Okay, and then one of my favorite little tidbits before we get into like this collection of poetry is that an excerpt of Vuong's novel was used on a college entrance exam in Australia. And droves of high schoolers flooded Vuong's DMs on Instagram with questions and accusations like, what does this even mean? And like, I'm not going to go to uni because of you. Like, I don't understand it. And Vuong had some really great responses. He like posted on his story, yo, what the hell is an HSC exam and why are you all failing it? And people responded, there's some really great ones. Someone said, okay, but like what did your text mean? With 3 N's and 4 question marks. Little dog, question mark, gray hairs, 4 question marks. Vuong posts, meaning, I too am haunted by it. And another, so you the one that got us all fucked up, crying faces. He writes back, don't let him tell you literature can't change lives. With some emojis. So yeah, he seems like an absolute delight to interact with. I think it's really funny too. He even wrote a little bit of a personal response. Like he also has talked about how he did really poorly in high school and he didn't really think of himself as intelligent or someone that could do any of the things he's doing now until he went to his community college and he had like kind of a life-changing experience in his very first literature course. So he did write some like encouraging things back as far as like, hey, I went to community college first. If you don't get into uni right away, that's cool. Like there's other opportunities for you out there. So yeah, that's a little context on our author. A lot of the poetry that we'll be discussing also touches on many aspects of his personal life. So some other tidbits will come up as we go.
Okay, so I'm going to explain this collection a little bit and then we'll get into it. So this is Ocean Vuong's debut poetry collection, which seems to act as a kind of memoir, grappling with the personal and family history and conflicting identities he has lived with up until the point of writing. The collection is divided roughly into 3 untitled sections. The first focuses on his parents, their experience of devastation and loss during the Vietnam War, the trials of immigrating to America, dealing with the trauma these experiences left behind. The second section then turns its gaze to Vuong himself and his own queerness and the complex feelings that come with being a queer person of color, the child of refugees in the United States. And then finally, in the third act, he seems to kind of synthesize all the past experiences and come to a kind of resting place on his journey towards self-acceptance and bodily autonomy with the final 2 poems, Someday I'll Love Ocean Vuong and Devotion. And then you close the book and you sit back and you cry.
Yeah, that's about it.
That's the book.
So for our discussion, we picked out a couple poems that we wanted to kind of dissect together and talk about some of the major themes and forms and fun things that we find in this poetry collection. Mm-hmm. I personally love poetry and also really enjoyed talking about it in class in school because it was like, oh, there's so many things I don't understand about it, but then maybe we figure it out together as a class. I can hear other people's opinions and thoughts on it. And I know for a lot of people, poetry isn't fun. Like it doesn't seem like a fun, exciting thing. It can seem like this kind of gatekeepy, like I don't understand what it's talking about. I don't really know what it's about. I'm kind of saying a lot of things that my dad says when I talk about poetry. He's like, I don't really get it. Yeah. But I was hoping that maybe we could talk through in our discussion today of like how we read poetry and how we like quote unquote get it or don't get it often enough and what we still find enjoyable about it. I had the realization today when we were prepping, like, this might sound very cliche, but like poetry is like songwriting, right? Like the writing songs is so related to writing poetry, and many songs we know come from poems, and it's set to music. And there's so often that I listen to a song, and I know you do this a lot too, because you listen to a lot of non-English music, where you have no idea what's being said.
Yeah.
Like, no idea what the words mean. Sometimes it's just an idea. I think of like Florence and the Machine. I don't know what the fuck she's talking about half the time, but I love it. It's just a vibe. You love how it sounds. And I think that's what hits home with me with poetry too. It's like, I don't always know what it means. And I'm not going to say I do most of the time. I have ideas of what it might mean to me. And I'm just curious how we have this conception that songs can be so personal to the listener, but we don't always give that kind of, what does this poem mean to you approach in our classrooms and in like our, I was going to say discussions, but I don't really sit around talking about poetry with my friends, except you. But yeah, like in our classrooms, there's not as much credence given to like, oh, what does it mean to you? Like, what do you find beautiful about it? It's like, here's exactly what the poet's doing. Let's learn about these structures and forms. But anyways, that's my little mini soapbox before we get started.
Yeah. I think what a lot of people struggle with poetry is they feel like they're bad at it, and a lot of times our school system does not reward failure and struggle and hard work. Instead, it rewards you either are good at it right away or you give up and you do something else. And that tends to be what works the best in our school system. And with poetry, like, it's not supposed to be any one thing, It's supposed to be personal, and it's supposed to be weird and complicated, and you can't come to a conclusion about it. It's weird to take tests on it,
Yeah.
Like, it makes sense to write essays about it and be like, this is what I think it says, but to take tests on it, like, that's fucked up. I think for a lot of people, they think they're bad at it and they give up really early, and they don't learn. They're never taught that it's okay that they don't understand. Like, the people who are quote unquote good at poetry, like us, I guess, don't know what's going on most of the time. And that was something that we wanted to focus on as we talked through this, is like, we have ideas. We love these poems and we have certain ideas about them, but we were like lost for a lot of it.
Yeah.
And so many of our notes are like, I love this metaphor, or this sounds so cool, or I love this poem. I have no idea what it says.
Exactly.
So that's what we're going to do today.
So, okay, the first poem I want to start with is Self-Portrait as Exit Wounds, because I think it captures many of the elements of the collection that I really love, but also is the perfect example of me being like, what does this mean? I don't understand. And I can kind of talk through how I kind of pieced it together for myself, and I'm curious what your experience was reading this one. I'm going to go ahead and read this poem in full. Self-Portrait as Exit Wounds. Instead, let it be the echo to every footstep drowned out by rain, cripple the air like a name flung onto a sinking boat, splash the kapok's bark through rot and iron of a city trying to forget the bones beneath its sidewalks. Then through the refugee camp, sick with smoke and half-sung hymns. A shack rusted black and lit with Ba Nue's last candle, the hogs' faces we held in our hands and mistook for brothers. Let it enter a room illuminated with snow, furnished only with laughter. Wonder bread and mayonnaise raised to cracked lips as testament to a triumph no one recalls. Let it brush the newborn's flushed cheek as he's lifted in his father's arms, wreathed with fish gut and Marlboros. Everyone cheering as another brown gook crumbles under John Wayne's M16. Vietnam burning on the screen. Let it slide through their ears, clean, like a promise, before piercing the poster of Michael Jackson glistening over the couch. Into the supermarket where a Hapa woman is ready to believe every white man possessing her nose is her father. May it sing briefly inside her mouth, before laying her down between jars of tomato and blue boxes of pasta, the deep red apple rolling from her palm, then into the prison cell, where her husband sits staring at the moon until he's convinced it's the last wafer God refused him. Let it hit his jaw like a kiss we've forgotten how to give one another, hissing back to 68, Ha Long Bay, the sky replaced with fire, the sky only the dead look up to. May it reach the grandfather fucking the pregnant farm girl in the back of his army jeep, his blonde hair flickering in napalm-blasted wind. Let it pin him down to dust where his future daughters rise, fingers blistered with salt and Agent Orange. Let them tear open his olive fatigues, clutch that name hanging from his neck, that name they press to their tongues, to relearn the word live, live, live. But if for nothing else, let me weave this death beam the way a blind woman stitches a flap of skin back to her daughter's ribs. Yes, let me believe I was born to cock back this rifle, smooth and slick like a true Charlie, like the footsteps of ghosts mixed through rain as I lower myself between the sights and pray that nothing moves. Originally, I was like, okay, who is speaking? What is this narrator point of view? Like, I don't know. Beautiful images right out the gate. I was like, great, sounds gorgeous, but I don't know what's happening. And then on a like sentence level, it's just like one giant sentence. And so like that felt really different as I was reading it. But once I read it like 2 or 3 times, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. So let's talk about the point of view. So when we say like narrative point of view, what do we mean?
Point of view is basically whose eyeballs are we looking through? Or you could think about where is the camera? But yeah, whose body in the scene, whose eyeballs are we looking at? You know, so that can also mean whose feelings are we feeling, whose understanding of reality are we getting, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. When I first read this, I was using a pencil and writing in the margins, and I just wrote in all caps, like, what is it? Because we get the word it all over the place, like the first 3 words. Instead, let it be the echo to every footstep. What is it? I don't know. What is it?
Yeah.
And then after I read it all the way through once, I wrote, beautiful to read aloud, strong images, but unclear what the center of the poem is. No idea. I was like, I don't understand. And then finally, I was like, oh my gosh, it's a bullet. It is a bullet. And so then I read it again 2 more times, understanding it as a bullet. And it was just like, very different. I find myself in what I assume is common, but maybe it's not, this trap where I assume like the poem is about the poet, unless it's like told differently, like in the title or in the very first couple lines. And so this poem forced me to sit with it and like noodle on the words and like have that moment when I realized that it was a bullet. Like I'm seeing this poem through the eyes of a bullet whizzing around, and we're seeing all these different, quote, exit wounds. So that was kind of the connection point to me when I was like, okay, what are exit wounds? That's usually after a bullet has left the body. Mm-hmm. And that's what, that was the moment when I had it. Aha. Did you get it right away? I'm curious.
No, I didn't get it until you put it in the notes that's what it was. And I was like, oh, yeah, that makes so much sense. Yeah, no, I didn't get it at all. I think I didn't realize the thing that was missing so clearly as you did, where you were like, what is this it that we're referring to? I didn't realize that was the problem of like my comprehension, what I was missing. I was seeing the montage, right? Because the bullet goes through all these different moments. I got the sense we were going back through Vuong's family history in some way, but I couldn't put my finger on what the point was or why or what was happening. And as soon as you told me that it was a bullet, for me, what I went to was, this is not the bullet's point of view so much. Like, it is and it isn't. Like, if we imagine we put a camera on a tiny interdimensional bullet, that, but the person shooting it, like, the bullet didn't shoot itself. Like, so the speaker is the one who fired the bullet. But we put a camera on a bullet, and it's whizzing through. The person shooting the gun is the one shooting it back through his history. And it almost felt like he was trying to undo all of the wounds that had occurred. Like, this bullet, he was blaming this one bullet for, like, all the pain in his past. And if he could just turn back the clock and kind of undo it to, like, the very heart of the beginning of it, then maybe he could fix it. But also, he's the one firing the gun, so it's, like, it feels complicated. But that was kind of the feeling that I got, is that it's not strictly the bullet's point of view, like, that's where the camera is, but the intent, the feelings are of the person who fired the gun.
And it has this kind of like cyclical element to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like one reason I kept rereading it is because it kind of forces you to, in a way. Again, it begins, instead, let it be the echo to every footstep drowned out by rain, cripple the air like a name flung onto a sinking boat. And then at the very end, we get that image of rain again, and that sound of footsteps.
And the fact that it starts with instead.
Yes, that was you're like thrown off kilter from the very get-go. You're like, instead of what? I also thought the ending was like incredible too, because it's saying like, and nothing moves, but like immediately I want to go back to the beginning and see it all move again.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, that was my reading of it. And I'm also curious too, like we set out saying like, oh, understanding poetry is much more about the reader's experience than like what it actually is. So when I say, oh, it is the bullet, I don't know, that's my reading of it. I think I could make a pretty strong case that that's what's happening, and that's what helped me connect to the poem, is understanding, this as a bullet being fired through history by the speaker of the poem. But that may not be what it is. It's not like there's a cheat code at the back of the book.
Right,
like the end of the Sudoku puzzle book where that gives you all the answers.
Yeah.
There's none. There's none.
Wouldn't that be amazing? What are some of your favorite images in this one?
Ooh, so I really liked some of the ways that we get these metaphors, so like these descriptions or these similes. If you remember back to your English class, that's when a sentence uses like or as to compare things. We get that, but the comparison doesn't make it any more clear. And I just love that. One of my favorite is, cripple the air like a name flung onto a sinking boat. Like, none of it makes sense. Like, cripple the air. What does that mean? Like a name flung onto it. Like a name flung onto a sinking boat does not help me understand what cripple the air means. But the line is beautiful. Like, I like saying it. I like thinking of what it would look like to cripple air. Maybe it's like the sound of the bullet, like how a bullet moves through the air. Is that sound being described as a cripple? I don't know, but I like it.
Yes, it's stunning. What it made me think of, like something I figured out eventually, is this book makes more and more sense as you read through it, and I realized it's because it's self-referential. Like, if you realize a lot of the poems refer to certain moments again and again, there's this pretty strong visual earlier on in one of the poems where he is named, and his own being named Ocean gets brought up again and again because it's so symbolic, right? It's like crossing an ocean and fleeing Vietnam, and there's so much tied up in that. And so what I saw, like a name flung onto a sinking boat, was the naming again. But I don't know. I don't know if their boat was sinking. But there's this very strong image of him being named on a boat. Him being named Ocean while they're on a boat. And I don't know if that's how it actually happened, or if I'm reading that right, but that's what I thought of. So he's tying his own name to this bullet, and it's like shaking the air somehow. Maybe?
Maybe. Another one I loved was, let it slide through their ears clean like a promise. I don't know what it means to slide through ears clean. And I especially don't know what like a promise means, but I like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes me think of how a promise can be really slippery. Like, it's just words you say. And sometimes promises can hold a lot of weight when people have action behind it. But a promise can also just like slip like one in through one ear out the other, like a promise for something better, but that isn't actually the physical manifestation of that promise coming true yet. It's just the sound of someone speaking. I don't know. That's what it makes me think of, but I have no clue.
I feel like I see the physical visual there more than the metaphor. I see a bullet literally sliding through someone's head, through the ears, but I don't know what clean like a promise means.
And then the one that really got me towards the later half of the poem I literally had to read this line like 5 times, and I don't know if I'm anywhere closer to understanding what it might mean. The line is, "Let me weave this death beam the way a blind woman stitches a flap of skin back to her daughter's ribs." And so, like, we get this repetition of let it, and then later on it becomes let me. So let it being, if you want to read it as the bullet, perhaps, let me, the speaker referring to themselves, weave this death beam. So death beam is making me think it's like the trajectory maybe of the bullet. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, okay, I can hang with the let me weave this death beam. And then we get the blind woman stitching her daughter's ribs, and I'm like, I don't understand. But it's such a specific image. Like, I can imagine someone with a flap of skin and someone using just their their sense of touch to put it back together. It's like it's such a strong like mental image, but doesn't yet carry meaning. And I'm curious if I noodle on it, it might have more meaning to me at some point.
I wonder if that's also something that literally happened. He just came up with that in his brain? I'm like, so not only is this woman sewing her daughter back up, which is already a devastating image on its own, right? But then the woman is blind, and so she's probably not doing it cleanly, but she's trying to fix the situation, but maybe is having a hard time. That gives you such a strong sense of like what the speaker is trying to do. He's trying to fix things, and there's so much pain, and it's not going very well.
Yeah, and he can't like fully see what he's trying to do.
Yeah, because when he sets up his sights, right, he hopes that nothing moves into the field of vision. And then, what about this long ass sentence? The fact that the whole page is just one sentence.
For me, I didn't even notice at first until I read it out loud. So I think this was something like a teacher told me with like Shakespeare. And I definitely remember a poetry writing professor telling us to read our poems out loud when we were working on them, to like hear how they work. And so I've used that kind of as a tool when I don't understand something, just to read it out loud, to give myself a chance to feel it in my mouth and to hear it. And that has helped me. I know some people don't like reading out loud because then the effort is on the reading and not the listening. But so reading out loud is when I realized like, oh my gosh, this is so long, because I was waiting for a period to breathe and it doesn't come. So you get these commas. And we also get this repetition of the phrase, let it, and later let me, that kind of breaks things up a little bit and like creates a rhythm to it. But once I kind of connected the dots that maybe we're following the trajectory of this bullet, it connected every single image. It connects them all together as like one experience. The bullet doesn't stop flying anywhere. It just continues into the next scene. It's kind of the meaning I am imposing on this sentence structure.
That makes sense, because it's a constant movement. And your sort of camera, right? I'm going back to, we're putting a tiny camera on a bullet. Your camera hasn't stopped moving because the bullet hasn't stopped moving. And so you can't have a period because the bullet isn't stopping. So we can't stop to savor anyone's scene. We got to keep going.
And then in the same way, we do get one final period at the end when the speaker says, and pray that nothing moves. Maybe trying to impose some sort of stopping at that point.
Control.
Mm-hmm. This one is also particularly dramatic because in the printed version, it's quite easy to see, but it's the end of the first section. And so the whole next page is just blank with a little like slash symbol or dash, I guess, that breaks up section 1 to section 2 in this collection. And so it's like a very definitive like end to the poem, end to the section, lots of blank page just to like stare at and pause. It's like in a movie where they give you like, it cuts to black and you get a beat before the lights come again or the picture comes back.
Mine is a square.
Oh, nice. She has the UK printing? Is that what you have?
Yeah, mine's the London. That's so interesting that that's what they would change.
Well, I think it's because the covers. Because the cover of mine has the picture with the title and Ocean Vuong's name in like horizontal strips, whereas yours has the picture in a square.
Oh my god! I think you're right.
I think it's an aesthetic choice on the designers.
All right. That's cool.
Yeah, so I think this was a poem where I really stopped and wanted to like understand it more. So there's some poems where I read it for the first time and I'm like, interesting. Maybe I like look up a word or two I didn't know or write some initial thoughts in the margins. Sometimes I write a giant question mark next to it and just move on if like I don't understand it, but it didn't really draw me in. This one drew me in to a point that I was like, oh, I really want to stay with this one. I want to spend more time here. And so I took a break to look up some of the words I wasn't familiar with. So ha long bay, hapa woman. Then, like I said, I read the poem out loud to like hear it. And that kind of helped me piece together some of the sentence structure and how this was like working as a full piece. And then I just really sat with the title because I'm like, there's got to be something in the title. Because like I said, I was really stuck on the fact that I didn't know what it was. Yeah, I had a poetry professor in college that always would say like, your title is the first line of the poem. Like, never waste your title. Like, that's a really important piece. And so it's also helped me in reading poems, too, of, like, not skipping over the title, but, like, let it inform the piece. And sometimes it might feel very straightforward. Like, there's a poem in here called Ode to Masturbation. I think the poem's about a bit more than just that, but it kind of, like, centers you from the get-go. Like, this is what this poem is going to be talking about. Whereas this one, it gives a nod, you know, it gives some strength to my reading that it is a bullet because it talks about exit wounds. And that's kind of that was my entry point to like, okay, what if I read it as these are all different wounds? What is exiting? Oh, a bullet. So that's how I like worked through this poem. I probably sat with it for half an hour, like to get to this point. And I don't do that with every poem I read, to be frank. There's many poems in here I read once and was like, fascinating. I'll keep moving. Maybe I'll come back to this another time.
Yeah, I feel like this is something we've talked about before when reading stuff you don't understand. But just keep going. Like, I think the image that we get to at the end of the speaker setting up the gun is extremely informative to then when you go back and reread, see what he's looking at, you know, at the very least. Gives you some context. I feel like that's something that happens a lot where consuming any type of art that takes time, I feel like you don't have all the information at the beginning. And so you have to keep watching, you have to keep reading, keep listening in order to see the full picture. And then you can go back with that knowledge and see it again, read it again. And so for me, my strategy is always just keep reading. And then if I want to dedicate the time, if I feel like I'm close and I care enough about the poem, but I haven't quite got my finger on it, what I do is I ask myself some questions and I kind of mess around with the poem a little bit in my mind. I'll look at a phrase and I'll say, okay, is this literal or is this a metaphor? Like, what would happen to the meaning of the poem or the physical setting of the poem if I changed my initial thought about it? Like, if I thought it was a metaphor and then I make it literal, what does that mean? What does that happen? What happens? Where are we now if this is literal? Versus if I make it a metaphor, what would that mean? What is the poem saying? You know, so I try messing around with my initial interpretation. I also change how I group the phrases in my mind, you know, because there's line breaks and there's punctuation. But the way that poetry works, like, where you move from one phrase to another one is often up for debate. Or when you're in one physical place and then you're in another one, also very often up for debate. And so I try shifting where I think the phrase ends. And I say, okay, if I group this phrase in with the previous one, what does that do? And so I just kind of move things around like little puzzle pieces. And I try and construct kind of a physical space, because a lot of times grounding the poem somewhere in time and space is often very helpful and provides a lot of context. And so as I'm going through this process, my goal is always to situate myself in time and space and then start from the beginning and say, okay, if that is true, what does this mean? And a lot of times I'll find something. I still won't understand it completely. There'll be certain images, certain things that I'm just like, well, what does that mean? I don't know. But it'll help me feel like I have a grasp on it. And if that doesn't work, then that's okay. Maybe the next one will speak to you. Like, it's not the end of the world. It's really fine. It doesn't say anything about you or the poem. It's just like, you're not a good fit for each other.
Yeah, it's like listening to an album and your friend is like, this is my favorite song. And you're like, I mean, it's good, but like, I don't know, it doesn't really stand out to me. But then you listen to it like a year later and you're like, this song just speaks to my soul.
Yeah.
Like, I know it now. Yeah.
Exactly. The next poem I want to talk about is called Anaphora as Coping Mechanism. And the whole reason, like, this was one that I didn't understand on the first read completely. But what locked me in was this one sentence that just, I felt it in my bones. I just, like, I don't know any of the context, but I know exactly what this feels like. And I was like, I have to figure this poem out because I love this line so much. So the line is, he dies at the party where everyone laughs and all you want is to go into the kitchen and make 7 omelets before burning down the house. I was like, I don't know who he is. I don't know where this party is. I don't know why he's making 7 omelets and then burning down the house. But I for some reason knew exactly what, like, pain and rage and displacement and, like, feeling so, like, immediately we're put at a party where everyone else is laughing and we just want to burn the house down. Like, I know exactly what that feels like. And that sort of centered the whole thing for me. It just gripped me. And I was like, I need to know the context for this scene. I need to know what's happening. And so I was, like, determined to go back and figure it out. Then when I reread it a couple times, all of a sudden I was in love with the whole thing, because once I figured out the structure of how this poem worked, I was suddenly able to visualize it really, really well. Like, I'm a very visual person, but I often struggle to visualize the physical space of a poem because sometimes it doesn't have one, or it moves around a lot, or it's kind of metaphorical. And so once I figured out what this poem was doing, I was able to see so clearly and feel like exactly what Ocean Vuong was doing. And it really got in my feels, and it just felt very cinematic and devastating. Mm-hmm. And I love pain. I love pain. We know this about me. And so here we go. Anaphora as coping mechanism. Can't sleep. So you put on his gray boots, nothing else, and step inside the rain. Even though he's gone, you think, I still want to be clean. If only the rain were gasoline, your tongue a lit match, and you can change without disappearing. If only he dies the second his name becomes a tooth in your mouth. But he doesn't. He dies when they wheel him away and the priest ushers you out of the room, your palms 2 puddles of rain. He dies as your heart beats faster, as another war coppers the sky. He dies each night you close your eyes and hear his slow exhale, your fist choking the dark, your fist through the bathroom mirror. He dies at the party where everyone laughs and all you want is to go into the kitchen and make 7 omelets before burning down the house. All you want is to run into the woods and beg the wolf to fuck you up. He dies when you wake and it's November forever, a Hendrix record melted on a rusted needle. He dies the morning he kisses you for 2 minutes too long when he says, wait, followed by, I have something to say, and you quickly grab your favorite pink pillow and smother him as he cries into the soft and darkening fabric. You hold still until he's very quiet, till the walls dissolve and you're both standing in the crowded train again. Look how it rocks you back and forth like a slow dance seen from the distance of years. You're still a freshman. You're still terrified of having only 2 hands, and he doesn't know your name yet, but he smiles anyway. His teeth reflected in the window, reflecting your lips as you mouth hello, your tongue a lit match.
This poem also felt like heart-wrenching. I drew a little like broken heart emoji in the bottom corner. I didn't make many notes on this. I just underlined that repetition. So anaphora, or as I always thought it was anaphora, which it's not. That's just not how you pronounce it, but that's what it looks like. Anaphora is repeating something for emphasis. And so the repetition of this poem is he dies, he dies, he dies, he dies. And oh yeah, the omelet image also really got me too. And I know it's not connected because this came out way beforehand, but Only Murders in the Building Steve Martin's character makes omelet after omelet after omelet as kind of like a bit of his grief for missing his like not daughter that he spent like many years helping raise, his like ex-girlfriend's daughter. And that's the image that came to mind for me, is that when you're just like doing something out of routine because you like are grieving, but you keep realizing you're messing up, so you just throw it away and you start over, but you're so stuck in your grief that you can't do it right or how you think you're supposed to, and that feeling just want to burn it all down. And I thought this poem captured grief in such a like, it does what poetry does best, right? Like explain something in excruciating detail that's so specific that it becomes universal. Like that universal feeling of grief, even though I've never made 7 omelets and burned a house down during a party yet, at least.
You never know.
Yeah, it becomes so specific that you get it. You just like feel that intense emotion alongside the speaker of the poem. And so, okay, if we want to get nerdy about it, how do we think the poem is doing that? How is it making us feel those intense emotions of grief?
It's the structure of the poem and its sense of time and space are all sort of working together to create almost like it feels very cinematic. It feels like, oh, I can totally see how they would do this in a movie. So we start with this very abrupt line, can't sleep, right? It sets the scene and the time, right? Someone is trying to sleep and they can't. We're in this headspace of like, maybe there's a lot in their head, right? And they can't sleep. We know what that's like. And there's a very quick line break and it sort of feels like an abrupt, maybe getting out of bed. And then we have, so you put on his gray boots. Notice the 2 different pronouns there. So you put on his gray boots, nothing else, and step inside the rain. Even though he's gone, you think, I still want to be clean. If only the rain were gasoline, your tongue a lit match. So we have this initial sort of, we're still in the time and place of you can't sleep. The speaker is putting on someone else's boots, and we get that whoever's boots they are is gone. And we have this image of, if only the rain were gasoline, your tongue a lit match. Like, I just want to burn everything down kind of thing. So we have the physical time and space, right? We have the feeling that we're with. And then it all sort of changes, right? And we get the sense this person is like going for a walk in the rain or something. And we have this really long block of text during this walk in the rain where we sort of flash through different moments. And each new moment we get, it starts with he dies. So every time we get the word he dies, we have like an edit, right? We click to a new scene, and you get the sense that we're sort of going back in time. So we start with the death, the actual moment of death, right? Where they wheel him away and the priest ushers you out of the room, right? Then we sort of move back and back and back and back in time. And this big block of text with no line breaks feels like this sort of hurried walk through the rain. It's like all jumbled in the person's head. It's sort of a montage of memories that are piled on top of each other and they're getting mixed up. This repetition of he dies is sort of the way that the grief is like infecting all of the memories, right? So we have the actual moment of death, and then we have this interwoven, we have a new way of seeing these past memories, right? And then at the very end, the pace starts to slow down, and it's attached to this precious memory where it says, look how it rocks you back and forth like a slow dance seen from the distance of years. Right? So we slow down, we're in this emotion, but it also explains kind of what we're doing, right? We're looking back over the years at precious moments, precious memories, and there's this sort of angst and grief to it, right? So we get the sense that the speaker is mourning someone, but we get the moment when they first meet. And then you sort of understand at that point, oh, so we're remembering this relationship in reverse. Go slow, and then we slow down to the very first point. But then it catches up with us. In the final 2 lines, we sort of return very violently back to the present. The last phrase of the poem, we're in this sort of really happy memory, right? There's all this like they're meeting for the first time. It's going to be amazing, this kind of feeling. And then we click back to the present because we repeat this phrase from the beginning. You open your mouth to say hello, your tongue a lit match. That's how it ends, which is a phrase that we got at the very beginning. And the tone has switched a little bit, right? It's used a little bit differently. So in this scene at the very beginning, there's more excitement over this new person. Rather than at the beginning, it's sort of a desire to like burn down the world. But it brings us back into the present moment of this walk in the rain and that kind of bitterness and the way that this grief is infecting all the memories of this person with pain, and it kind of brings us back to the present. So, and it just guts you. It just gets you right in the soul.
Right in the feels.
Oh, man, right in the feels. I did want to say something about the anaphora, because when I looked it up, I realized there's technically 2 definitions of anaphora.
Ooh.
One of them is the repetition of a word or phrase, usually at the beginning of successive phrases, which we've talked about already, right? He dies, he dies, he dies. But it's also the use of a substitute or referent, such as a pronoun, to refer to something already mentioned in discourse. So I think the he dies phrase does both. I think the line repeats at the beginning of each new phrase or memory or span of time in the big block of text, but also the fact that the person is dead, he dies, he dies, he dies, is inserting itself in place of that person or that memory, and it's infecting all the memories with the knowledge that he is now dead. And it seems like the speaker feels a bit of guilt because he sort of implicates himself in certain things, and the fact that he, at the very moment of their meeting, says, your tongue a lit match. There's a certain sense of self-hatred there that's interesting, and there's this smothering with the pillow, and yeah, I'm curious, but I found that very interesting that technically it has 2 definitions, and I think it kind of both work.
That's cool. I like that.
Yeah, I wonder if that was intentional or not. I don't know.
So, similar with anaphora as coping mechanism, the next poem I want to talk about has another like word in the title that really, for me, helped frame my reading of the poem. So, Aubade with Burning City. This one was so haunting and beautiful and just so well written that I could like hear and see what was being described so vividly. And then after my first 2 readings of the poem, I was like, oh, I should probably look up what Aubade means. And I'd forgotten that I think I studied this in college in my music classes, but an Aubade is a morning, like morning as in the beginning of the day, morning love song. And it's usually about lovers separating in the morning. So if you think of like the scene in Romeo and Juliet where it's the morning and they're like, oh, I have to leave you. I don't want to leave you. I do have to leave you. We will be found out. It's that kind of sentimentality of like,
wow,
we love each other, but we have to be separated after our night, our tryst or whatever. And so reading that poem again with that understanding really highlighted the he and she, that relationship that is kind of like littered throughout the poem. Yeah, it just made it even more haunting too to read this scene of the fall of Saigon, the city on fire, burning, people trying to evacuate, and reading it as a morning love song. This poem also has a bit of like flavor text at the beginning, which we don't really get very often in this collection. We get a couple like quotes or like, you know, there's like an Emily Dickinson quote at the beginning of one of the poems. But this one gives you a little bit of an explanation. South Vietnam, April 29th, 1975. Armed Forces Radio played Irving Berlin's White Christmas as a code to begin Operation Frequent Wind, the ultimate evacuation of American civilians and Vietnamese refugees by helicopter during the fall of Saigon. So then it kind of explains why we have the lyrics of White Christmas kind of fluttered throughout the poem. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was an interesting way to like ground us as we like dive in. Okay, so I'll read the full poem. Aubade with Burning City. Milk flower petals in the street like pieces of a girl's dress. May your days be merry and bright. He fills a teacup with champagne, brings it to her lips, Open, he says. She opens. Outside, a soldier spits out his cigarette as footsteps fill the square like stones fallen from the sky. May all your Christmases be white. As the traffic guard unstraps his holster. His fingers running the hem of her white dress. A single candle. Their shadows 2 wicks. A military truck speeds through the intersection, children shrieking inside. A bicycle hurled through a store window. When the dust rises, a black dog lies panting in the road, its hind legs crushed into the shine of a white Christmas. On the bedstand, a sprig of magnolia expands like a secret heard for the first time. The treetops glisten and children listen, the chief of police face down in a pool of Coca-Cola, a palm-sized photo of his father soaking beside his left ear. The song moving through the city like a widow. A white. I'm dreaming of a curtain of snow falling from her shoulders. Snow scraping against the window. Snow shredded with gunfire. Red sky. Snow on the tanks rolling over the city walls. A helicopter lifting the living just out of reach. The city so white it is ready for ink. The radio saying run, run, run. Milk flower petals on a black dog like pieces of a girl's dress. May your days be merry and bright. She is saying something neither of them can hear. The hotel rocks beneath them. The bed a field of ice. Don't worry, he says, as the first shell flashes their faces. My brothers have won the war, and tomorrow? The lights go out. I'm dreaming. To hear sleigh bells in the snow. In the square below, a nun on fire runs silently toward her god. Open, he says. She opens.
God damn.
I hadn't read that one out loud. That one reads different.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how much the lyrics fit into a sentence. Like sometimes the lyric stands on its own and sometimes it's part of the sentence.
Yeah, that White Christmas bit is really haunting because and all the lyrics of White Christmas are in italics. This one also feels very cinematic. It's like a moment in history told through these sort of small, striking visual moments, but it also has a soundtrack. You know what I mean? And so it feels, I feel like that's what a movie would do. If you were watching this, seeing these little snippets, maybe you would have a camera moving through little sneak peeks into different people's homes, maybe following this he and she, that White Christmas would be playing over the top. So it really grounds you in this space and time, but you're also in this sort of pulled back, more omniscient point of view, maybe from a helicopter? Now I'm just saying that out loud. I just thought of that, but like these sort of chaotic snippets from this sort of burning city. You're hearing the music, seeing the colors, you're feeling the heat, the fire. And it ties into how chaotic this poem is on the page. It's not all lined up on the left or right. It's like all throughout the middle. It's very chaotic. The length of the lines is all different. And you can sort of feel the chaos when you look at it. But the imagery is so visceral and primal, and in this one, very gruesome.
Yeah, like the image of like a teacup with champagne, that one really stuck out to me. The chief of police face down in a pool of Coca-Cola, a palm-sized photo of his father soaking beside his left ear. It's like so specific, and I'm like, is it blood the color of Coca-Cola? Is it literally Coca-Cola? And there's just like so many ways you can read that too, because it's also like a nod towards like the American involvement that's central to this conflict, this war, and this suffering. I also think there's like historical fact, right, that they use the song White Christmas as code, but then it's also like so odd, and I don't know, I'm like, of course he would write a poem about this, because it's so like, it almost feels poetic that they would take this like very American song that is about Christmas, like a Western holiday. It's talking about snow, a thing that you don't experience in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And then even just like sometimes like the racial conversation too of whiteness, and the American presence in Vietnam. I don't know. There's just like so many layers to it too that I think that's what really like drew me in, is like how many different ways I could read this song within these scenes as well.
Did you also read, because there's lots of mentions of snow outside of the song lyrics, did you also read that as ash?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought as well. Because there's snow scraping against the window, snow shredded with gunfire, snow on the tanks rolling over the city walls. The city's so white it is ready for ink. What I feel like what I loved about this poem is the colors. All of the imagery has these three colors. It's red, white, and black. And so you get the white of the ash and the white Christmas, but there's also a white dress, there's a sprig of magnolia, but then contrasted in that phrase I just read with all the ash is the red sky, and we know it's a burning city, so we know that this is like fire. And you get the blood, and you get the Coca-Cola. There's so much fire. And then there's also the black. There's a black dog, the ink, city so white and ready for ink. It's really just these three colors over and over and over again. And the final one that was not my favorite image, the one that really got me. And it's also the final one. In the square below, a nun on fire runs silently toward her god. A nun is dressed in white and black, and she's on fire. So we get all three of the colors. We get the sense that it's silent except for the white Christmas that's playing. And for some reason it felt in slow motion to me because she was running silently. And it just, messed me up, man. So haunting, that sort of final image. And it was interesting because I feel like these three colors, these probably weren't intentional references, but it reminded me of all these other things. Like the point of view of death in The Book Thief, where he tells the story from his point of view with the colors red, black, and white. That's sort of how it introduces the book. And so you get this sort of devastation that way. And then also the film Schindler's List. It's black and white, but you get the little bit of red. And there's a lot of movies that do that, right? Where it's black and white, but then there's this one thing in red that's symbolic or significant in some way. And I felt like I could picture exactly what this would look like in film and in slow motion with White Christmas playing over it. It was just so incredibly constructed. I was just like, damn. All right, Ocean Vuong.
That was the point in the collection I was like, here we go. Yeah. I was just like, this is a really intense and vivid poem, and made me like really sucked into the collection as a whole.
Hell of a way to get started. So honestly, we had so many more poems on our list. We worked so hard to like so many notes. Down. We have so many notes. Like there's literally like 2 more poems. We cut 2 this morning, and then we have a bunch of other notes about like all this other stuff, but we got so invested in the 3 poems we did cover, and Victoria's time is running out.
Sounds like I'm about to die. I just have to check. I just can't be in this recording room past the end of the hour.
Yeah. So please read this book because there is so much more that we haven't covered, but hopefully this was kind of an introduction to how to read difficult poetry. So, recommendations?
Yeah, you go first.
So, my recommendation is if you want to read some more devastating queer poetry that's gonna fuck you up, read Crush by Richard Seiken. I think is how you say his last name. It's, wow, painful.
I want to go just... I say this every time, and people should call me out on it. I always say, I'm going to go read more poetry, and then I don't until we do another episode. But if you are curious about the history, elements, the personal narrative of refugees fleeing Vietnam, we've discussed on this show before the graphic novel, graphic memoir, The Best We Could Do by Thi Bui, which I think does an incredible job on capturing the history in a pretty succinct way, but also telling the really emotional story of her family as refugees and their experience transitioning into life in America. So I would recommend that.
Yeah. Maybe go read his novel.
Yeah, I want to go read his next collection as well. I believe from what I was reading to prepare for this episode, the next collection has a lot of reflections on his mother passing. And he writes about grief so beautifully already. I'm curious to read more.
Okay, and then currently obsessed, I have been watching the full lexicon of queer TV on Amazon Prime because I got 1 month of Prime. And I got to fit it all in. So we have A League of Their Own, Paper Girls. It's incredibly well done, and it was canceled. But it's like pre-Stranger Things, with girls and time travel, and it's great. And then Interview with a Vampire remake. Oh my god. That show, man. They really went for it. The lead actor is one of my faves as an actor and a musician. Just all around great person. Jacob Anderson, aka Riley Ritchie. Incredible work. And then the album, Funny in a Foreign Language by the 1975. One of their best, gotta say. So just great media for Julia all around these last 2 weeks. It's been a good time.
I'm curious. Okay, yeah. I want to go watch more of Paper Girls. I watched the first episode, and I mean, I might be part of the contention of why it didn't get renewed because I loved the comics. Like, I read the whole series. And I just didn't feel like the show fully pulled me in the way the comic did out of the gate, even though it is very true to the comics. I just don't know. I was interested in watching more. I just wasn't like, I have to finish this now. But I think part of it also is that when you don't know what's going to happen and you don't know what is happening because you just get thrown into it.
Yeah.
It really has that, like, I have to know what happens. I have to know what happens. So I'm curious of coming to it, knowing the full story. I'm like less, like, I have to know.
Yeah. I mean, the plot is a big reason you go to episode 2 for sure. And then you fall in love with the characters as you go. I do think, they got real teenagers to play teenagers. With any kind of child actors, you can see them acting. It's not quite as immersive when you've got children involved. So I could understand that.
Okay, so I've been currently obsessed, in the most literal definition of obsessed, with finding a green velvet couch for my new apartment. I decided that's what I wanted, and I haven't let go. I did find a teal blue, so it's kind of in between a blue and green, velvet armchair today.
Okay.
That we might get secondhand from someone. I'm on edge because I just want to look from my little comfy velvet chair out into like the city skyline of where I live now and just be cozy reading my book. Like, that's the image I have, and I'm obsessed with that image, and I just need this velvet chair so I can sit in like my very old apartment building looking out my big window and have that, like, bookish vibe.
So you are chasing the aesthetic.
I'm chasing the aesthetic hardcore.
Yeah.
I also have been reading the most thrilling and ridiculously cheesy, like, witchy vampire murder mystery series.
Great.
I just looked up, like, I literally did an Amazon search of cozy mystery novel Halloween. Like, I'm like, that's the vibe. Again, I was going for the vibe. We'll link it in the show notes. I'm forgetting the author's name right now, but the first book in the series is Spelling the Tea. So that I've been obsessed with that. I'm already on book 2.
That does sound very cozy.
It's so cozy.
I'm tempted by it, yeah.
Like, people keep dying, but it's like, you're not fazed.
Right.
Because it's too cozy.
Yeah, what is it about English murder mysteries where you're like, this is so comforting. People are dying left and right, and I have never felt so relaxed. What is that? Why have the British convinced us that murder mysteries are the most comforting narrative?
I don't know, but I'm pretty convinced. Thank you for listening to Book Club with Julia and Victoria. We would love to hear your thoughts on this book or the topic we discussed, so you can share your review and recommendations with us on Instagram at BookClubWithJV, on our website, bookclubwithjv.com, or by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. You can also visit our website for show notes with links to all of the recommendations and the things bringing us joy. If you don't already, go ahead and follow us on whichever podcast platform you are listening on so that you can be notified when our next episode is released. This episode was co-hosted and produced by myself, Victoria Bruick, along with Julia Clausen. Rebecca Gasme provides us with project management support. Our music is composed by Greg Bruick, and our logo was designed by Gabby Fabland. Until next time, happy reading.